So everything is a state of consciousness. And so a lot of people ask me about ADHD. Austin, what is that? What does this mean? Is this something that's permanent? Is this something that's a problem with me? Is this something that, I can't fix? And the answer to that is it's totally fixable. Because what ADHD is, it's a state of consciousness. And so a lot of people resonate with this aspect when they try to do something that they're wanting to do. Maybe it's a certain task, maybe it's chasing their dreams, maybe it's focusing in on a task. But ADHD is a state of consciousness. And what I mean by that is if we never learn how to control our mind and our thoughts, we're always acting on the thoughts that enter our head. And so like right now, I'm walking up this path. And so say a thought enters in my head, oh, I'm hungry. So now I want to leave and go eat something. And so right as I'm leaving, I have another thought, oh, I'm thirsty. So I'm going to get something to drink. And then I have another thought, oh, I have this thing that I need to do. And then so on and so forth. So what's happening is all these thoughts are entering into our heads and we're constantly following them. And so what ADHD is not having a filter on those thoughts. And so when a thought enters your head, you automatically get distracted and bought into it. And that's an ADHD state of consciousness. We're always changing what we're doing, never completing anything, disorganized, disfocused. Disfocus, I don't know if that's a word, but there it is. But the key is realizing this is a state of consciousness that you can exit out of. This isn't something that you have to stay trapped in forever. I was diagnosed with ADHD at age 6 on medications for 18 years. And I was able to overcome it. Overcome medication, overcome the negative aspects. And this is something that is totally doable and I help other people do. And I've helped many people get off their medications because of this. Because once you realize what it actually is, you can solve the problem. And so the key for getting rid of the state of consciousness is tapping in further to yourself and connecting to your own true self. And so that we're not identifying with all these thoughts, feelings, and emotions that enter into our awareness at any given moment. So that we can separate ourselves from those thoughts. And so when those thoughts of distraction come up, when we're working on a specific task, we're no longer going to follow those thoughts because we become the observer in the situation. And this is why meditation and breathwork is so important, because it allows us to separate from our thoughts. And when we can separate from our thoughts, we can be that observer rather than being fully engaged and we think we are our thoughts and we identify with them. And so any thought that comes into our head, we just do. And so the key is enabling ourselves to separate ourselves from our thoughts and emotions so that we don't become them. And so that was key in my transformation from leaving from that state of consciousness. Because I used to be very unfocused. I would always switch doing different projects. I was disorganized. And it would show up in all aspects of my life because it was my state of consciousness. It's something that gets patterned into our subconscious minds and our nervous system as well. And so sometimes there can be an aspect of trauma that deals with this certain aspect of ADHD, which I've seen. Because if there's trauma in our body, it can pull us out of the present moment. And so this is the same thing with pain as well. And so depending on whether the pain is physical or emotional, this can prevent us from focusing. Because instead of being in the present moment, I have this pain that I feel in a certain part of my body. And so for a long time, that kept me in the state of ADHD, because I had a traumatic pain that was emotional, and it showed up in my body as physical. Because everything starts from the mind. Everything starts from the mind. It starts from our mind, and then it goes into our nervous system, which is our like energetic emotional body, and then it shows up into our physical body. And so when one of those parts is out of balance, our mind is going to be out of balance. And when our mind is out of balance, it's going to show up as these different symptoms, is what they call ADHD. And this is something you can free yourself from. I've done it. It's possible. I've done it for other people. And, people tell me, well, my doctor told me I have ADHD, I take pills, and, all these different things. But the interesting thing about ADHD is they say it's because of a chemical imbalance. Yet, if you look at the studies that actually go into that, about the chemical imbalance, you realize that those are not sound studies. And that chemical balance has really never been isolated and shown to be true when you look deeply into the research. And so when you realize that the medications, they just solve symptoms. And so the symptoms are what shows up on the surface in our physical reality. But when we operate from a couple levels higher, from our mental body, energetic body, our nervous system, we can start to find the root causes as to why these things are happening. And so this state of consciousness is present in a lot of people that I see, even though they don't have a diagnosis, even though they don't take medication, because it shows up in them trying to chase their dreams, yet it's not happening. They're going after their goals, yet it's not happening. So there's something that always gets in the way of achieving what we want, because we become distracted. And so if we're distracted, we can't stay focused on one task, one project, one dream long enough so that we can accomplish it. Because it requires us planting a seed, and then we have here a flower. And so in order for this flower to grow, we first had to plant that seed. A seed had to be planted in order for that to grow. And so expecting and knowing that it's going to grow and allowing it to grow is how all this stuff works. It's because our own true nature, and I love this quote, is nature gets everything done and we don't have to rush. And it's the same thing with us. We don't have to rush in anything that we're doing, but we have to stay focused. It has to come from within. And we have to follow our own internal guidance in terms of growing. But, this flower only grows two directions. It grows below and then it grows above. And so in the video that I was talking about yesterday, we first have to really ground ourselves into the ground. And so the roots grow downward into the soil, and then the plant starts to grow upwards. But if we're trying to grow in every single which direction, that's that lack of focus. So there's certain steps that we have to follow. But a lot of us, we want to do X, Y, and Z. I want to work on this project. I want to work on singing. I want to work on skateboarding. I want to work on painting. And I want to do this. I want to be an astronaut. All these different things that people want to do. But if we're not focused on one of those things, we're not watering that seed. Because each dream, each goal is like a different seed. And so we only have so much energy per day. And when we only have so much energy per day, we can only water so many seeds. And so if we're watering 10 different seeds, 10 different projects, 10 different ideas, those projects and ideas are only going to grow so much. And this doesn't mean that we can't do things in parallel. This doesn't mean that we can't work on one thing and then also work on another thing. But when you're just starting out in the process, there's a set process for when you plant the seed and it starts to germinate and the roots start to grow downward. And so grounding yourself in that project and staying focused on one project is really key. Because if we're watering all those different seeds, we're scattered. And when we're scattered, we're not as focused. Because what I found to be true for myself and others that I've helped is if we focus watering one seed at a time, we'll get much better results. And so if you have a dream to say start a business, tarot card reading, or you want to start a painting business and sell your artwork, or you want to become an actor, or whatever it may be, most of your effort and energy should be focused on watering that idea, that goal. And when we water that goal, it'll start to become more apparent in our reality. That growth will start to happen and we'll start to see it. And when we start to see it, it builds that momentum that organically starts to grow. And then it starts to become a habit and a part of our nature and growing in that specific direction. And so when we gather that momentum, we can start working on other projects. But first, it's really necessary to gather that momentum first, rather than starting 10 projects at the same time. Because that activation energy for it to start takes a lot of energy. And when we get more accustomed and more comfortable with that specific thing that we're working on and becoming, we can kind of take off a little bit of energy, and then we can start to water those other seeds, those other ideas, those other projects. But the main thing that I see that prevents any normal person, and ADHD is just a label too, and that's a whole other thing, is, whatever we call ourselves and whatever we put on our identity, we become that thing. And so when I was labeled with ADHD as a child, I told myself, because everybody told me around me, you're disorganized, you can't focus, you're messy, you work on different projects, and you do all these different things. And so I told myself that, and that became my mantra. That became my reality. I became messy. I became disorganized. I became the person that would switch projects and never get anything fully complete. But then I realized I had to let that go. And so in order to become somebody new, we have to let go of who we are. And so that's another really good quote that I actually absolutely love. Because we have to let go of our old identities and our old beliefs in order to step into something new. And a lot of people, they get trapped in this belief that ADHD isn't something that they can get out of. And so how can those people step into a new reality if they believe it's something that's permanent and I'm always not able to focus? And so it's a very disempowering belief that's put on people, and it's absolutely criminal. because it literally disempowers the person. Oh, I have ADHD, I can't focus, I'm always switching projects, I have 10 different hobbies, I can never get anything done. And it just becomes their reality. And that was my reality for many years. Until I was like, okay, I have to separate, let go of this identity and all the traumatic events that surround myself that hold up this belief. Letting go of that so that belief no longer stands. So it no longer has roots in the ground. You basically have to take it up like a weed and pull the roots from the ground so that it doesn't grow. Because whatever we focus on grows. And so if we're always telling ourselves that, like a mantra, like I was, I'm unfocused, I can't get things done, all those types of things. I'm this type of person. Whatever you tell yourself is true. If we tell ourselves ADHD is real, I can't escape it, I have to take medication, that's going to become real for you. But if you tell yourself, you know what, I think I'm more powerful than this label, I can free myself from it, that's going to be true for you as well. And so that's why we see so much, disparity and so much, difference in people. Where some people are so adamant that ADHD is real, I can't escape it, it's here with me forever. And there's other people like, yes, I can overcome it, I can empower myself, I can become something far greater than the label that I was casted. And so for both of those people, for both those mantras, those are true. Because whatever we tell ourselves to be true becomes true. And that's the whole thing with this. And this applies to anybody. Because anybody, when we're starting something new, and when it gets difficult, we want to stop. And when things get difficult, we want to work on something else that's easier. And so for me, when I was starting out doing breath work and helping people, there was times with what I was doing with the people a few years back that the people were like, yeah, I didn't feel anything. I didn't get anything from that. And so for me during those times, it was like, shit, I thought I was making a big difference in this person from this breathwork session. But then I was like, okay, I guess I better work on something else. This isn't for me. And so for a few weeks, I was working on other projects and was totally distracted because I'm like, this is too difficult. This isn't working. So this is just a sign to do something else. And, my inner voice kept on telling me, you have to keep going. And so I pulled my energy back from watering these different other projects and other ideas that I was watering and pulled the energy back. And then I started to learn more and more about breath work, more and more about meditation, more and more about spiritual practices. And then the next time I had a person, they had this extremely incredible breakthrough. They had this problem specifically. They were dealing with this trauma and this sadness from one of their parents dying, specifically their father. And specifically from that, they were carrying on to a lot of this sadness that they weren't even aware. It wasn't even in their conscious mind that they were carrying this. But during the session, she had an absolute release. During the session, she bawled, cried, screamed for literally 30 minutes. And afterwards, she told me about her experience. And during the experience, she had connected with her father that had died 3 years prior, and she felt that she had closure. And from her father meeting her during this vision, during the breathwork session, she was able to get closure, because her father during the vision was like, everything is okay, don't worry about me, I'm completely fine. And she just had this release. She cried and cried and cried and cried. She was carrying on to the sadness. She was carrying on to this heavy experience. And then afterwards, she felt like she had a weight lifted off from her chest and shoulders, because she was dealing with tension in her chest and shoulders. And then she had felt that completely release. But this is something that shows up in our physical body that's not conscious, but it all starts in the mind. And so this exact situation was something in the energetic emotional body, that she was carrying on to these emotions in her body. And so being able to release those, that then causes the domino effect to help heal her physical body and release that tension, because everything is energy. But back to my main point is, everybody has a little bit of ADHD because it's a state of consciousness. But the key is choosing, what aspect of my life do I not want to have ADHD with? What aspect do I want to have focus? What aspect am I trying to grow? What project am I starting to work on? What do I need to put energy on? And what can I leave by the side for now? And I can come back to that later. And so the key is analyzing, what's my primary focus? What's my primary passion? And chasing that and watering that.